I'm just over here praying that it's going to stop. Hey guys, Trevin here, Gear Shift Garage, and I'm with Jay Roberts, and we are, I don't know where we're at.
We're in Orchard Gap, Virginia.
Orchard Gap, Virginia.
Right along the Blue Ridge Parkway.
We're standing in front of the infamous
Gonzo Prius.
Gonzo Prius. So tell us about this record and why this car is so special.
Well, this car has done 5 Cannonball runs. It's set multiple records. One has set the non-stop record for a Cannonball run in 33 hours, 45 minutes. Just this year, I converted it to a self-driving car, and I set the autonomous vehicle record, 43 hours, 18 minutes, 98.4% autonomous driving.
Jeez.
A few days after that, we established the record for the Spanish Trail, that's San Diego to Jacksonville, non-stop autonomous.
Wow.
Which was a lot of fun. It's also currently tied for the record of the car that has done the most runs at 5.
Jeez.
So my wife bought this car brand new. It was her car officially up until very recently. And when I did my first Cannonball run, I was planning on taking the Prius that I owned at the time, in 2011, and she insisted that I take her car because this car has more safety features than mine did, with the emergency braking and the self-lane centering and adaptive cruise control. And ever since that first run and the musket ball run, she's like, well, it's your car now. She's like, it'll never be mine again. You know, and since then we've done I had lots of fun in it.
That's awesome.
So,
tell us about autonomous driving.
okay, there's a company called Comma.ai, and they make a system that mounts to the car. It's currently over 300 cars that is compatible with. And how it works is it taps into the self-lane centering and the adaptive cruise control that comes from the factory in those cars. And it uses a forward-facing camera. As you can see, it's monitoring the edges of the road and the lanes painted on the road. But you see, my feet are flat on the floor. I am not touching the steering wheel at all. I have the cruise control set at 45 miles an hour, the speed limit on this road.
So that's how you drove this from New York to LA?
Yes, on that 43-hour, 18-minute drive, we touched the steering wheel for 38 minutes total combined time.
Whoa.
To drive across the country.
So you have a solo record? Or 2 solo records?
Well, I have the solo nonstop record.
Solo nonstop record means literally no stopping, right?
Yep.
How many gallons of fuel did that take to do this?
When I left the Red Ball garage, I had 107 gallons total fuel load. The 11-gallon of the factory tank plus 96 gallons worth of auxiliary fuel that was divided up amongst 3 32-gallon fuel tanks. It was 2 of the tanks in the back, and then I had to remove the front passenger seat to mount the 3rd tank.
Wow. That's a lot of fuel.
It was a lot of fuel. It was a lot of fuel to manage. So the 2 tanks in the back, I developed an automatic fuel delivery system that had digital programmable relays in the front, and every 7.5 minutes, it would turn on the fuel pumps for one of the tanks, and it would run the tanks for 8 seconds.
Oh, wow.
And that gave me 2 gallons an hour of fuel transfer into the car's factory tank.
Interesting. And then what about the front one?
The front tank, I just had a smaller pump that it just dumped all of the fuel into one of the tanks in the back.
Oh, okay.
And I could hear all the fuel pumps clicking, so I knew when those tanks in the rear were empty because the sound of the fuel pumps would change.
Gotcha.
And so as soon as I heard that, I would just, the fuel tank pump with the front tank only was like, I think it was like not even a half gallon a minute of flow. So I just flip it on, let it run an hour till I heard it making sound that it was empty, and I knew the one tank in the back was full.
Gotcha.
And so that was a great help transfer the weight.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. So you leave from Red Ball Garage to Portofino. Tell us a little bit about that, and then also tell us about the Spanish Trail and what that's about.
Well, the Red Ball, the the Cannonball Run is named after George Irwin Cannonball Baker, that did a lot of records in the early 1900s. And Brock Yates, when he restarted what we know as a modern day Cannonball Run in 1971, he named it after George Baker.
Okay.
So that's how the name Cannonball Run comes into play. Brock did a run just as a test run with his son and another driver in an old van they called Moon Trash 2. Yes. And made the run and had such a good time. He wrote about it in Car and Driver magazine.
Okay.
And so he put a thing out, say, anybody want to do a run, fly, send me a letter. We're going to do this in the fall. And they did the run in 1971. Later in the fall, it was a group event. I forget exactly how many cars. It was less than 20 cars that showed up. And uh, the car that won it was a 1971 Ferrari GTB,
Okay.
and Dan Gurney was Brock Yates' co-driver in that Ferrari.
Oh, cool.
So the famous race car driver.
Mm-hmm.
And so naturally Brock wrote about it and it became a big hit. The main purpose of Brock bringing it back was to protest the upcoming EPA mandates on
Right.
automobiles. And the government was proposing a 55-mile-an-hour maximum speed limit nationwide.
Right.
That was one, to preserve fuel because there was an oil crisis going on in the country then, and another was to promote safety. And Brock Yates was totally against it. He wanted to prove that safe drivers in well-prepared cars could drive across this country at any speed they wanted to and not hurt anybody or harm anybody.
Right. And that's
And
an important thing to note because nobody's been hurt from Cannonball, right?
nobody. So there's only been one single incident that happened on one of the runs that Brock did, and it was no offense to the women, but it was an all-female team who was sponsored by a bra manufacturing company called the Wright Bra Company that no longer exists. And they all had matching pink suits, and they drove a Cadillac limo.
Okay.
And one of the drivers fell asleep, drifted a little bit off the road, and rolled into a field. And one of the members of that team, she broke her arm. That was the only injury
Wow.
that's ever happened in the over 50-year histories of the run.
Wow.
So then Brock did it again in 75, and then he did the group run again in 79. And that run in 79 was the basis for the Cannonball Run movie
Right.
that he worked out with Hal Needham to do a few years later.
And everything, and a lot of things in the, I shouldn't say everything, but a lot of things in the movie are based on real things that happened.
That actually
that
happened.
actually happened.
Like the ambulance story in the movie, Hal Needham put together an ambulance, and they actually did a run. Well, they attempted to. They had some failures of the ambulance
Right.
across the way, but it did finish. But it was on a flatbed trailer.
Right.
So
Obviously, Cannonball's still going on. You've got the jacket and patches to prove it. You have the record here with the car. Tell us about the Spanish Trail run. What is that?
the Spanish Trail is the shorting driving distance between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans in the United States. It starts at Dog Beach in San Diego, California,
Okay.
and finishes in Jacksonville Beach in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow.
And so the Spanish Trail, portions of it were some of the original routes that George Irwin Cannonball Baker mentioned earlier. That was the routes he had to take on his transcontinental runs.
Okay.
He started further south. And a lot of guys have taken up doing the Spanish Trail Run for speed. The record was recently broken in just over 23 hours. Just think
Wow.
about that. Less than 24 hours to drive from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean
Crazy.
in this country. It's an
Wow.
amazing journey.
That is amazing.
So, and I've done it twice so far, and when I do it, I start at to do a Cannonball Run, get to LA, try to recover from that. Well, I have to bring the car home. So
Oh,
living on the East Coast, it's like, why not do the Spanish Trail? So I'll go down to San Diego, drive to Jacksonville, and then come back home.
got it.
Well, having done that twice, other people started doing it, and I was asked to name that particular run. So it's now called the Gonzo Run. We start at the Red Ball Garage, go to the Portofino, go to Dog Beach, go to Jacksonville.
Okay, all in one
all in
shot.
one shot.
Jeez. So what inspired you, or what I guess got you into Cannonball?
Um, YouTube, more specifically VinWiki.
Okay.
So just prior to COVID, the YouTube algorithm started recommending me channels to watch, and I stumbled across a video. This tall guy with a voice made for radio, has since become good friends with Ed Bolin of VinWiki, and I just became absolutely obsessed and infatuated with the modern day Cannonball Run. You know, I remember the movie as a kid,
Right.
but I did not know that it was still going on and still happening. So from those videos, I started digging into the modern history of it. In my research, I found a place called the Radar Detector Forum.
Okay.
And naturally, I'm thinking of doing a run. I'm going to need a good radar detector.
Right.
And a member of that forum mentioned the Cannonball Run one time, how he had participated in it. So I reached out to him privately. We started talking and chatting. And he's like, "Yeah, I want to do a run." I'm like, "What do you want to do it in?" I'm like, "My
Prius.
Prius." He's like, "You're crazy. You'll never do that." Well, he had an invite to the Musketball Run
Okay.
that John Vicar was starting, and that was the 101 horsepower less cars.
Right.
And he secured me an invite to that private page. John put it out that the run's going on. Here's the entry fee. Pay your entry fee. I did. I showed up. And that was my first
That's
event, my
awesome.
introduction.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's how I became obsessed with it. And so been doing it ever since. My goal on that run was to do the nonstop run,
Okay.
but I only had 2 tanks in the back. And what I learned about the Prius is I actually was driving it too fast.
Interesting.
So the Prius up to about 110 will easily get over 30 miles to the gallon. Above 110, it barely gets 20.
Oh wow.
And so on that Musketball Run, there was a 6-hour window where I held it to 115 miles an hour, and the fuel economy was so bad that it just nearly emptied the tanks.
Got it.
And so I had to do another fuel stop to complete that run. But I learned that exactly a year later. I added the third tank to the front and made my run for the nonstop run, and I kept the maximum speed between 105 and 107, just to
Got it.
preserve that fuel economy. I
Sure.
found the sweet spot of where between speed and a fuel
And
economy.
economy. We were talking about that earlier. A lot of people, something I'm realizing now, there's a lot of people that are just trying to throw as much horsepower and fuel as they can, and they don't take into account that there's diminished returns once you get to a certain speed, right? And
Right.
aerodynamics start playing a factor for sure.
And the horsepower as well. You
Right.
know, this car we put on it, it was required for the Musketball Run. They had to test the cars on a dyno, and this put 102 horsepower on the wheels. And the sound of a Prius on a dyno is hard to describe. It's like it's like a shop vac and a bench grinder are having a fight. Just from that and me coming into the community and telling stories of how hard I've run this car, I've been given the nickname, thanks to Ed Bolin, of the Valentino Balboni of the Prius. You know, Valentino
Yeah, yeah.
Balboni, the
Yep.
famous test
Lamborghini
driver.
for Lamborghini. Yep.
Yes. And so, because it's as no one has ever run a Prius as hard as I have. This Prius is 100% stock as it come from the factory. I haven't changed anything. I use factory Toyota air filters for it. The factory brakes, the suspension. I've done no performance mods to it in any way, shape, fashion, or form. Currently has right at 220,000 miles on this car. And looking at it, you wouldn't imagine. So was at a Cannonball Run reunion back in October in Connecticut, and Pam Yates was there and Brock Yates Jr. And Brock was signing autographs. I thought, you know what? I want to try to trip him up. I come to the car and I pulled off the engine cover, and I got Lady Pam to sign it, and Brock Yates Jr. signed it. And you see what he signed? Why? Question mark. Why? If you know Brock Yates Jr., that's his style. That's who he is. And that made me so happy to get them to sign it. So probably have the only Prius in the world that's signed
But
by Pam Yates and Brock Yates Jr.
man, if you ever get another one, that valve or that engine cover has to go with the car, right?
Yes, it will.
Or this thing just has to live forever.
Yeah, well, this is my, everyone has a forever car. People in the YouTube community, we all have. This is my forever car. If the engine blows up, it's getting another engine. If it gets T-boned in an intersection, it's getting
It's
rebuilt.
getting fixed.
This is my forever car. Whatever it needs, it's going to get.
Right.
Paint job, body work, it's going to get.
Yeah, yeah.
So I hope that I can put 1,000,000 miles on this car.
That's awesome. Hear that, Toyota? 1,000,000 miles.
Yes.
Send them a free one.
Yes, please. The Cannonball Run community itself, it never fails to amaze me, the camaraderie and the friendship that I have built in these few short years. But I showed up to Most Cannonball Run and no one knew me.
Right.
It was completely unknown, and just everybody there, they're they're wonderful people. They're kind. They're the most caring, giving people I've ever known collectively as a group. Any one of them can call me up. Jay, I need your help. I'm like, what do you need? And I know I can call up any one of them. Hey, can you help me with something? And they will be there. And we'll drive halfway across the country
Right.
to do it.
Yeah, totally.
To spend time with each other. And yeah, we do the runs, but the most valuable moments have been when we're all gathered together around the dinner table or out in the parking lot around our cars, drinking a
Right.
beer, talking and having a good time. Those are the most valuable moments.
Oh, for sure.
And the crazy thing, the entry into becoming a member of the fraternity of lunatics, as Brock Yates called us, is you got to get in the car at the Red Ball Garage and drive to Portofino.
Right.
It doesn't matter how fast you did it in, what vehicle you did it in, just go and do a run and prove it.
Right.
And get the letter jacket and show up to the events, and we're going to treat you just the same as if you set a record or you didn't set a record.
Right. Right.
Just because you did the hardest part.
Right.
Is showing up and making a run.
We were having this conversation at dinner last night, and I think that part of that is you have, like you say, you can do all the planning, you can have the fastest car, but you can't buy your way into the endurance of the whole thing, right? It takes a lot of willpower to force yourself to stay awake that long and drive across country and get there in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of weeds out the people that you wouldn't want to have in this group, right?
Yes, there's you've probably heard it as well. There's some people that talk about doing it in ways that scares those of us who have done it.
Right.
We know they're mentally and physically and emotionally they are not prepared to do this. They're going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else. They don't fully comprehend the risk of driving at those speeds on public highways for that amount of time. What it does to your body, why you can endanger other people. And that is our biggest fear, that someone that doesn't understand it tries to do a run and hurts themselves or someone else. And we absolutely do not want that to happen.
Right. That will end the sport, right?
It will. It'll end it right then.
Right.
And, and that would be a shame if that ever happened, because that would ruin Brock Yates' legacy.
Totally.
That good drivers in safe cars can drive across this country at any speed they choose,
right,
and not harm or hurt anyone.
Yep, totally. Well, thank you for talking to us and showing us the car, and it was awesome being out here. And he took us for a tour on the Blue
Ridge Parkway.
Blue Ridge Parkway, which was awesome. And I'm sure I'll see you again soon on another run.
Man, so there you go. Now let go of the steering wheel.
Oh my goodness.
Now you're in the left lane, so we aren't going to drive like your typical Prius that's hogging the left lane. So I'm going to give you instructions. Signal your right, just lightly signal it, and just nudge the steering wheel to the right and let go.
Wow.
It got over into the right lane, and you didn't have to.
I didn't have to do anything.
Touch or add anything.
I'm just over here praying that it's going to stop.
And can you feel it?
Yeah.
Feel it braking?
Yeah. Bringing this in.
So you haven't touched anything, and it's maintaining safe speed, safe distance. And it was a non-event, right?
Yes, it's great.
And people say, oh, I'd be scared of that. I'd be scared of trusting it. And it's your first time in it. You've
Yeah.
driven 3 miles.
And
And you got
we're
accustomed
doing
to
it
that quick.
Yeah, no, this is great.